All right, here we go. This is our third installment of Math This Week. As you can see, we are at the end of the unit, and that means we're going to probably have a unit test sometime next week. Don't stress too much about it. We will do some review early in the week, and then do a little practice before the unit test. So not that big of a deal. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. Today we are going to talk about our last topic, which is how are ratios, fractions, decimals, and percents all related? How can we go back and forth from one to the other? And how do we do that, etc. So before we can do that, let's just make sure that we are clear with going from a decimal here, in this first situation, from a decimal to a percentage. 0.4 as a decimal, simply move the decimal over 2 places to the right, or times it by 100, which moves the decimal over to two places, 40%, which is a fraction is 40 out of 100, because we know that percents are out of 100. So we can go from a decimal to a percentage quite easily, and we can also go from a percentage to a fraction quite easily, because it's just out of 100, remember. We could also reduce this fraction if we wanted to by crossing off those zeros and have 4/10, and we can cut that in half really and go all the way down to 2/5 if we wanted to reduce it. Here we've got the fraction 6 over 25. Unfortunately, this program wouldn't allow me to make a fraction, so it has to be a slash. But that's what the fraction looks like. If we want to express that as a percent, we're going to have to then first make it out of 100, which is timesing it by 4. So 6 times 4 is 24. So we now have the fraction 24 out of 100. And because it's out of 100, we already immediately know that that's decimal 0.24. As a percentage, we also know that that's 24%. And again, to go from a decimal to a percentage, then you would just times it by 100, move the decimal to 2 places. We can also take a ratio and turn it into a fraction or a percentage. And turning a ratio into a fraction is probably the easiest thing you could do. You take the sideways, basically fraction or ratio, and just turn it up on its end, which is 9 over 45. So you just make it vertical, 9 out of 45. Now, 45 doesn't go into 100, but I do recognize that these are both divisible by 9. So I can divide this by 9 and this by 9, and I get a new reduced fraction of 1 over 5. Once I've got a reduced fraction of 1 over 5, I know that that, if I double it, is 2 out of 10. If I times that by 10, I got 20 out of 100, which as a percent is 20%. It's also as a decimal 0.20. Finally, if I've got a decimal already given to me, it's pretty easy to make it into a percent just by moving the decimal over 2 places or timesing it by 100. So that would be 12.5%. And you could have a decimal in the percentage if you've got a half a percentage like this. If you wanted to make this into a fraction, it would be 12.5 over 100. Unfortunately, we can't have a decimal in the fraction, so we would have to multiply it by 10 to get rid of that decimal and move it over to 125, and times the bottom by 10 and get 1,000. So that is a fraction that would represent 12.5%. And yes, that is reducible. We could divide top and bottom by 25, which would be 5/40. If you've got a percent and you want to write a decimal out of it, it couldn't get much easier. You just simply divide by 100 or move the decimal over 2 places. to the left. So 18%, again, becomes 0.18 as a decimal. Again, just move the decimal over 2 places to the left, or divide it by 100. Same thing. So 85.8%, move the decimal over 2 places, that's 0.858 as a decimal. 3%, again, move the decimal over 2 places, 0.03 as a decimal. 33.5%, you want to make a decimal out of that. Move the decimal over 2 places to the left, and you now have a decimal 0.335. And finally, 112%, if you want to create a decimal out of that, again, move the decimal over from here to there, and it's 1.12, which means you have more than 100%. You've got all of it plus 12 more percent. Now, if we want to go back and forth, we've got ratios, we've got fractions, we've got decimals and percents, and we want to try and fill in a chart like this and relate them all. It's pretty simple. I think the first thing that I would do is take this ratio right here and turn it into a fraction, which is 4/5. As a decimal, remember, to create a decimal, I need to get this out of 100. So I would multiply the top and bottom by 20 in this case, which would give me 80/100. So my decimal would be 0.8 or 0.80. As a percentage, 80%. Now, let's say you're given the fraction to start with, which is 3/9. Unfortunately, this program wouldn't allow me to write it like that. So 3/9, the ratio is 3 to 9. The decimal, we're going to have to calculate using long division because 9 does not go into 100 evenly. I could reduce it. If I divide the top and bottom by 3, I get the new fraction as 1/3. And we've done this before. We have to divide 3 into 1, doesn't go in, put down some decimals, and do long division. It goes in 3 times to 10. 10 take away 9 is 1. Remember, we continue to get the same decimal over and over again. So it's 0.33 as a decimal. I'll put the repeating sign above the 3, and as a percentage, 33%. Now, what happens if you're given 88 as the percent, and you want to go back and find out what the fraction and the decimal is? Well, the easiest thing to do is find out what the decimal is, because that just moves the decimal over 2 places, and it's 88.88 as a decimal. If we want to do the fraction, remember that it's 88 out of 100. If it's talking about percent, which it is. So 88 out of 100 is the fraction. This one is reducible. I probably would reduce it by dividing it by the biggest number that'll go into 88 and 100. So I think it is, in this case, 4. So 88 divided by 4 is 22. And 100 divided by 4 is 25. So our ratio is 88 to 100, or 22 to 25 in lowest terms. Again, 88 to 100 is also correct. It's just not in lowest terms. Now, what if we're given a decimal? Well, remember, going from a decimal to a percentage is the easiest. I just move the decimal over 2 places to the right. So 0.14 of the decimal is 14%. Remember that 14% is out of 100, so 14 out of 100 is our fraction. They're both even, so I can cut them in half. I can divide it by 2. If I do that, I get 7/50 as my reduced fraction, and that means that the ratio is 7 to 50. Again, you could also say 14 to 100. It's just not reduced. It's the same amount, it's just not quite reduced. Finally, the last one is 5/6, which is a fraction. Easiest thing to do is make it into a ratio, which is 5 to 6. And then in this case, to find the decimal, I'm going to have to divide. I'm going to have to do long division. I'm going to have to go 6 into 5. It does not go in, so I'm going to have to put down some zeros. 6 goes into 50. Well, 6 times 8 is 48. 50 take away 48 is 2. Bring down the 0. 6 goes into 23 times, which makes 18. Bring down the 2 again, and the 0. And it looks like I'm going to have a repeating decimal again. I got 0.833 repeating. So as a percentage, again, just move it over 2 places. That's 83.3%. So we can go back and forth from ratios to decimals to percents to fractions fairly easily. Remember that percents are always out of 100, so you automatically have it as a fraction as soon as you know the percentage. All right, there's another chart that you can try on your own if you want to freeze frame it and give it a try, or just go straight to the worksheet and try the worksheet. See if you can go back and forth from ratios, fractions, decimals, and percents. Again, if you have any issues, let me know in our meeting.